couple of people have asked me to show some of the edits behind some of my more recent posts that I've been doing. Even though I haven't reached because I was asking basically on my Instagram and Facebook accounts to, if I get at least 30 likes, that somebody, that I would just do these little edit videos. But some of you said, well, can't you just do them anyway? Well, sure, I can. So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of them and go from there. No one said which one they want, so I'm just going to pick one and go from there and see if you guys like it. If you guys like it, great. Just make sure you hit those subscribe buttons and those like buttons, so at least I know that you guys are liking the videos. And if you like them, if you get 30 or more likes and stuff like that, I'll just keep making more and more of them and stuff like that. I'm a sucker for peer pressure, so so like I said, just let me know and I'll just keep making more. So without further ado, here we go. Alright, so I'm going to start off with one of the pictures that I did most recently. You can see I've been working a lot with some black and white, and that's the most recent ones up here. But let's go with one that everyone seems to be kind of gravitating towards. I'm not going to count this one because I don't really care for that one, but we'll go with this one because, well, it's got the most amount of likes. I shot this one, as you can see, at Homosassa Springs. It's a state park. This is Lou, the hippo. It's one of the oldest hippos in existence that we know of. And apparently she's 64. You didn't really know. I think Lou, he is 64 years old. So I'm going to go and show you how I did the edits on Lou and go from there. Now, what happened was that when I shot these pictures originally, I shot them in black and white, but I also shot them in RAW. Now I have a Panasonic camera, the Panasonic Lumix S5 II, and when I shot the picture, it was in black and white. However, when you shoot a RAW file, you actually retain the oops, didn't mean to do that. Let me cancel this for a second. Go back into Bridge. When you shoot the picture in RAW, you actually still retain the color information. So right now, when I open it up in Adobe software, it only shows me the RAW file. The RAW file has all the color data. So any of the black and white data or the black and white image that was actually shot or that I was looking at is not there. Now, you're thinking, well, crap, Donovan, why didn't you save it as black and white? Now, if I open up in Panasonic software, it would show me the black and white image because it would show me the monochrome. Now, I can open it up as a RAW file, of course, and then see it as black and white. Now, Adobe's black and white and Camera Raw is no way similar to what Panasonic's monochrome RAW is, all right? So even though I am deliberately shooting everything in black and white when I'm shooting it there, I'm having to keep a mental record of how I'm looking at this stuff. Keep in mind, I cut my teeth on black and white. When I was 15, I was shooting black and white rolls of film. And until, I don't know, let's see, my son's 20 now, so 20 years ago, maybe a few years before that, that's all I was shooting was pretty much in black and white until maybe about 2000, I'm 55, so you kind of do the math there. So the idea is, I was, shooting black and white all the time, so I'm pretty comfortable at keeping the visual in my head. Keep in mind, it's a learned skill, and it's something I'm fairly comfortable in doing. The thing that's nice about being able to do this, I can actually, shooting in RAW and doing this in black and white, is that I can actually be a little bit more helpful at working in the areas and doing the edits to get more precise control over some of the tonal ranges. Now, more so than I could in the darkroom. There were many times when I was working in the darkroom when I was trying to do burning and dodging and trying to work on highlights like up in here, like working on the highlights here, shadow details there, and I'd have to work on a bunch of different areas in order to clean up the black and whites and tonal ranges and so forth and so forth. Because, this is what you would see, what the camera would see. Again, there's a whole lot of soapbox for me on what you see. Well, this is what the camera saw. This is how the reality was. And to me, that's a bunch of bull hockey. There's no such thing of what the camera sees. The camera is recording the light as it hits the sensor, sure, but it records more data than what you can actually see. And the human brain can see so much, but it can't see everything that the camera records. So you have to basically use your own aesthetic judgment to make the picture the way you think it's supposed to be. It's an aesthetic value. It's a subjective choice. And it's all about you trying to make that call for it. Now, I don't use too much anymore these days Lightroom as far as the edits go at these times. I use mainly Adobe Bridge right now, and I kind of bypass Lightroom Catalog for most of the edits. It's not that Lightroom Catalog is bad or horrible, or use Lightroom Cloud, their other part of it. I used to use Lightroom Classic a lot. I don't really use it that much. I have my own cataloging system, which I can discuss at a later date. That's why you only see these particular files here, because I only downloaded the ones that I currently would be working with. So I'll just go straight into how I basically started this particular one. Now, everything I shot on this particular excursion, on this particular trip that I took, was all with a 50mm lens, the Sigma 50mm 1.4, and I pretty much shot on this particular one at 100 ISO. For those who are interested, at 1.4 at 250th of a second. You can see the number of pixels is approximately 6,000 by 4,000. Yippee skippy, that's perfectly fine and dandy. All this is just for those of you who are interested in this type of data. None of it matters to any of the stuff that you're going to see happening at this particular point. The final result, of course, was this. That was my final edit for the picture. And I'm going to try to start it over and show you what I did to kind of get to that, or at least what I was working on to get to those particular levels. So let me show you what I did, and I'm going to open it up. Now, I opened it up, and I just double-clicked on Adobe Bridge to open it up, and I opened it up in Camera Raw. Now, of course, if you don't have Photoshop or anything of that stuff, there are other programs to do something similar in this particular regards, but you can always start off in that particular thing and go from there. Now, one of the things that I typically do is that I try to remove the color data. Now, you can always hit the black and white. That's the easy way of doing it and going into that particular thing. And then you can then modify in the black and white mixer and going in that particular result. And that's one way of doing that, of course, and then you can play around with the sliders and you can do that. I don't really do that anymore because as you saw that there's also a color file there too. So this is how I've been approaching everything at this particular point. I start off with the color file and I reduce and I go to what's called the color mixer and I take away all the files. Now you can see on the color mixer I'm under the saturation. Now I take everything down to 0, mainly because if there's anything else like in here, there's not only a little bit of magenta, there's not too much purple. You can see when I go up to purple, there's a little bit of purple there, not much. There's certainly a little bit of blue down here. I'm pointing at my screen though, you can't see it. So there's a little bit of purple right there. So when you see it, there's a little bit of purple there. When I go to the aquas, again, a little bit of aquas there. So what do you see primarily in this particular picture? Lots of orange, lots of reds, up in there. And then there's also some yellows and some greens. So lots of this up in the upper levels, okay? So what I do is I take everything off of this. And then I say, well, now that I've got all this down into this, I'm gonna work with what I see here. And then after that, I'm going to do all my edits here in this particular edit. So I'm now going to adjust some of the exposure or shadows and highlights primarily. I'm gonna lighten up some of the shadows, maybe go up and down, somewhere right around there, and try to make it somewhere there. Now, I've already done this in the previous one, and now I'm looking at it again, so I might make some additional judgments as I go by through this thing. So keep that in mind. What I'm looking for is the details and the highlights here on Lou here. So that's what I'm more concerned about. I'm looking over here, but I'm more concerned about here because I don't want to lose detail in Lou's face. That's the one, because that's the only face a mother could love, you know. Lou's about, you know, about what? So I'm 55 now. Lou's 64, so there you go. So we're trying to keep Lou, you know, looking pretty cool in that particular thing. So I'm trying to keep the Lou's highlights down in there. Maybe put some blacks in there a little bit, but I'm trying not to lose too much of the detail in Lou as far as that goes, and go around there. Now, one of the things that I'll point out too, just for a little bit, I really love this 50mm lens. Yeah, it's at 1.4, but keep in mind, I am not next to Lou. So distance, even though it's at 1.4, you can see it's a little bit soft back there. And again, if you get even closer still, it's not necessarily tack sharp right there on the edges of there. I don't really care about that. The only thing I care about on Lou is Lou's eyes, because that's the most important thing. And that eye at 1.4 and this right here in Lou's face is more than acceptable within the depth of field. No one's going to go, at least for me, I'm not going to go boo about depth of field on that particular thing. So now that I'm looking at that, that's looking pretty good. Next thing I'm going to do, because what's cool with working in Camera Raw is you can actually work in a layered environment. And one of the cool things, what they call with their supposedly AI stuff, is you can do what's called subject detect, which is kind of cool because it tries to find Lou. So now that I've done a general overview of some of the highlights and shadows, I can actually go in there, maybe go a little bit tighter on some of that if I want to. So then I might go back in Lou and look up and see maybe if I can bring some of the highlights down. I don't want to go too much, because if you start going too much, it looks kind of weird and fakey type of things. Because again, I want to keep some of the detail on some of the skin and stuff like that. Now again, I'm not sure how well it's going to translate into the video for some of this stuff, because again, resolution in the video doesn't look necessarily as good as the screen. But again, I'm looking for detail as far as what I can see. Again, I'm playing with shadow details and stuff like that. So again, I'm concerned about the eye. So when I'm looking at the eye right there, I'm looking for shadow details in the eye, because if I go too much, I might get a little bit too much there. But I kind of like seeing some of that highlight there now. So again, I might want to keep the shadows down, but then I might want to create a new mask, select an object, and then maybe just paint the eyeball a little bit right in there. And say eyeball, hey, let's do a little bit of the shadows or highlights and bring some of that eye out a little bit. Maybe lighten the shadows of the eyes a little bit. Bring that out just a little bit right in there. Again, it might be as subtle, it might not. Again, for me, it's just something where I'm just trying to play around with it just to give it a little bit of a tick to it. Because when I go back to the normal, it gives me a little bit more of a pop to the eyeball. So again, that's just something that I'm kind of playing around with when I'm looking at all this stuff. Let's go back to this again. So now that I've got my subject there, and go back to that. The other thing too is what I like to play around with is I also like to play with the clarity and the texture and stuff like that. Because one of the things that I can do on that, let me move down. And I'm moving kind of fast because I don't really want to spend a lot of time, waste your time on this stuff, because you guys can slow this down, speed it up wherever you want. One of the things you can do is you can also play around with clarity and texture and stuff like that, and really kind of emphasize or de-emphasize certain areas. Again, if you go too much or too far, again, you can really go, you know, it depends on what you're doing, and bring it in or bring it too much or bring it in. But I always like a little bit of extra clarity, maybe a little bit of texture. But you can see it's giving a little bit of extra contrast in there. If you do like dehaze, again, you can see it does a little bit too much. But you can see right there, remember, the mask isn't taking everything on the subject. So again, you got to pay attention to where it's going to fall in on there and see how well it's going to work for you as far as the overall effect goes. Again, you want to step back and take a look at it and see how well it's playing for you on that particular thing. So right now it's looking pretty good as far as that goes. I kind of like that. Now I'm going to go back to that, and then I'm going to basically say, well, I want to basically go back and select maybe like duplicate and invert the mask. So it's selecting everything else right there. And then I don't really want to select this area right there, so I'm going to subtract that. So I'm going to get my brush, and I'm going to basically make that a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to basically do that. Now, for those of you, again, if you're not familiar with that, it's something to learn about with some of these things. You can make these brushes bigger and smaller. There are shortcut keys and stuff like that. If you notice right here, there's sizes for brushes down here. So you can make the brush smaller and bigger accordingly right here. You can change the size right there. There are shortcut keys, which I am not going to go over as far as that goes. Again, if you need a tutorial on this stuff, I'll be glad to go over that. This is just to show what I do to make some of these black and white edits that I've been working on. I went a little bit too much there, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to fix that and paint that back in there real quick. Because right now all I care about is I'm working on the water right there. So now that I've got that, I'm going to go back and work on the edits for all that stuff. I really want those shadows of the water to be slightly darker at this point, because I want to make the water not as there. And maybe I'll work on the dehaze of the water, make it a little bit darker. So that way Lou's got a little bit more front and center as far as that goes. So there we go. Now we got Lou. Lou looks a little bit more popped in there. It looks pretty good. I don't think it's too outlandish. I haven't gotten too far as, because if you really start to go too much on this stuff, then what happens is things start to get separated, too much of a separation. You know, if you get really too far, because again, if you start looking at the water line right there, then it gets kind of weird with the tonal range of the separation. Sometimes it can kind of blur it, sometimes it's not. But see, what you don't want to do is make it as such a noticeable effect between the two. And then what I'll do is I'll go back to here, I'll go back to my color mixer, and then go, what are you doing? You just took the color out, you made a black and white. Lou looks pretty good so far. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting the colors back. Why would you put the colors back? Well, it's because I was going to do something else a little bit different here in a little bit. And then I'm starting to dial some of these colors back into the picture again. And as you can see right here, sorry, my phone went off. Meant to turn that off. As I'm dialing the colors in, I'm not going full tilt boogie with all these colors. I mean, I could go high magenta. Again, there wasn't that much magenta to begin with, but I don't really need a lot of magenta in there. In fact, I can keep it low. Same thing with the purples. And same thing with the blues. I don't need a lot of blues in there anyway. But if you notice, I don't want to go full tilt orange in there either. So I can keep the oranges down as well. So I can keep everything down where I think it looks more interesting. And that way, Lou looks more like Lou. You know, otherwise Lou looks kind of weird looking, I think. Like that, like that, like that, like that. Again, it's always good to kind of blow that up and see where Lou is at as far as the coloring goes. And you look a little bit closer as far as that is and bring up the greens maybe just a little bit with the water. See where everything's there. Lou's looking pretty good, looking pretty special. There we go. So that's not too bad. So that looks pretty good to me. Then I usually click open in Photoshop at that point. Now once that's open in Photoshop, I can do most of my edits there. Now I'm trying to keep this in a 2:3 aspect ratio because that's how I shot it. Because some of the stuff is kind of cluttery in there. And like I said, I shot this with a 50mm lens. I'm shooting through some barriers there because they don't want you crawling in there with Lou. They want Lou crawling out and saying hi to the people. Though Lou is a little bit old, I don't think Lou's going to be chasing too many people these days because they were just done feeding Lou. And you just find a crop that's a little bit more pleasing to look at. And that way we don't really care about the rest of the stuff. You just find a pleasing crop that works for you for Lou. And for me, it was more like finding kind of the best of rule of thirds to kind of look at for that type of thing for Lou. So there we go. That looks pretty good for me. I kind of like that. Got enough of the ripple going out. You got Lou's mouth, and that works out pretty good for that particular thing. Blow it up, and you got fairly close to what I had before as far as that goes. So I like that so far. That looks pretty good. And so, well, Donovan, how did you get the black and white on that stuff again? Again, I can go back in there and I can go back into Camera Raw. But typically what I ended up doing at that point is I can go into here. The main thing was to get to the color that I wanted on here so I can have a color file. So I can either go back into, when I got the color file, I can save this color file there and then save it as. But typically I'm working in the same file and I don't really want to go back and forth. Now I can go into black and white here and save this here as black and white. And that looks pretty good. This is going to be fairly close to what I had in Camera Raw. And that looks pretty good. I can also do this like an infrared here. It's a pretty quick little result. I didn't care for it when I was doing plus stuff like that. Default worked out pretty good. And I think if I remembered right, I did a little tweaking right here with the greens because the water was green. And since Lou was red, I can brighten it up right there or bring it down just a little bit, which is what I remember doing, I think. And that way I can bring Lou into the picture like that. So that worked out pretty well. And I do remember doing this again right here, doing a little bit. I got dodge right, dodge tool, and coming around his eye and just doing a little bit of dodgy right. Oop, wrong one. Make sure you're in the right background and do a little bit of dodging right there. Now you don't have to necessarily make an extra layer to do this on, but like I said, I'm trying to make a black and white and a color one. So that way I can do, once I got this done, I can go back and forth. I'm going to put this in a group actually. So I can look back and forth like this and see how everything looks. And it looks pretty good and I'm pretty happy with that. The only thing that's distracting me right now is this bit right there. So at this point I can decide if I want to remove it or leave it in. As you'll see, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go open up the other file and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, so let me show you. I've got it open here and I'll show you what it looks like. So this is Lou. And then what I did was I went around and I fixed up a little things. So I went and I removed this right here, the little bit of green right there. I used generative fill to fill that in right there. Then I made a copy of that, and then I did, like I said, made that black and white. I went a little bit darker when I did was in that original one right there, and you can see I just did a little bit of back and forth right there. So again, that's pretty much how I ended up with Lou being the way I liked him right there. Once I was done, then I could save my black and white, and then I could also save a color version of Lou right there. So that way I can have a little bit of both if I want to, so I can go back and forth. So that way I have a black and white version and a color version. And it's kind of cool if I do it back and forth, your eyes go kind of crazy. Sorry. Anyway. So let me recap a little bit. So I shot some pictures in black and white. And what I did was then after I took those pictures, I put them in Adobe software. And when I opened up in Adobe software, that black and white information, of course, got chucked out. But that's okay. I've done enough of this stuff that I can retain this information. I know what I'm doing. So I feel, well, at least I have enough experience that I feel like I know what I'm doing. So it's easy enough for me to go back and do it over. I mean, to go back with enough experience to do the edits to get to what I want, to remember what I had. If you need a reference point, shoot a RAW and a JPEG file if you want to be able to shoot black and white, and that way you have a reference file to work with. Or just use the JPEG file if you want to. I shoot in RAW because RAW allows me to bring back shadows and highlights, or allows me to work in the edits and the shadows and highlights to get a much more realized picture because it's much more convenient for me. At least that's for me. It's much more convenient to get better edits that way. You don't have to use the color mixer in Camera Raw to do the edits that I did. Could I have done things in just doing the basic black and white edits? Yes, of course you can. I still feel I get a better nuanced look in the color mixer in Camera Raw, in Adobe's Camera Raw. Use it, don't use it, it's really up to you. I find it's much more useful for me. I got the tip from a friend of mine, Tom Connor, who showed me a video from another photographer who learned it from another photographer who learned it from another photographer. I've been using it ever since. I've been finding it's much more useful for me. I've been going back and using it on older photos and doing re-edits on those, and I find my editing technique is a lot better now by doing that. But that's how it works for me. I'm not saying that it's going to work for you guys. It's just saying it works for me, and it's been much more useful. And it's better. It works for me on a lot of color stuff. I like it because when I do it in black and white, I can see the black and white there, and it works out really good. Yeah, I'm going back to color again, and yeah, I'm putting it into Photoshop, and I'm using the black and white filter, but I find the black and white filter in Photoshop still does a pretty good job at getting me the black and white detail that I would like. It's just much more useful for me to have both versions in JPEG at a drop of a hat. Sometimes people want me to have both files, so I've gotten in the habit to have both files available if necessary. You don't have to do that. You don't have to have both color and the black and white. Some people just want the black and white, and that's perfectly fine. Heck, there's even cameras out there that just shoot only black and white. Digital cameras only shoot black and white. And that's perfectly fine, of course. So it's really up to you guys if you want to see what I've done here. If you see something else that you saw on the Instagram page that you want to see me do the edits, like some of the stitching I did or some of the more elaborate edits, let me know which one you want. You can leave it in the comments below, or just put more likes or get somebody to like more of those pictures, so that way I know which one you want, or just comment in one of the pictures, hey, show me more about this one and I'll do that one, or something along those lines. Something that gets that attention, so that way I'll do some more edits on that. Other than that, I hope you found this useful and how I approached some of the edit on that. That was pretty much one more of the straightforward ones. As I said, I think I talked pretty fast on that one. Like I said, I didn't really go deep into explaining. I didn't really want to do it as an Adobe lesson, so if you really need an Adobe lesson, I'll be glad to go over that with you as a private lesson if you want to do that, because that's a lot more longer than what I can do here. This was just to give you a quick rundown of how I do some of my black and white editing. Otherwise, you're talking about hours. It could be hours. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun for me to go on this trip. I liked taking all these pictures. You probably saw me doing my RV update that I posted. Whenever you see this, it was posted before this, so you have to see it. I haven't got my RV up. Hopefully, I'll be doing more photos with my RV, so you'll be able to more photos from RV trips, hopefully. So I'll be doing more excursions. So hopefully you'll get to see some stuff with that. But anyway, like I said, if you see anything you like, let me know, and I'll be glad to do some more of this stuff for you if you guys are interested. Thanks again. Have a great day, and just keep shooting some pretty pictures out there, guys. Thanks a lot. Bye. Somebody's button around somewhere. Oh, there it is.